When they're trying to check the balance, you don't see Doug Marcotta go and put his finger on the handle and go, "Oh, no, it's clearly tipping." Nor does he go put it on the last 6 inches of the long sword and go, "Oh, nope, it's tipping." They move it to the center and then it slide adjust, slide adjust, slide adjust to try to figure out where that center point is. That's the approach you want to take.
Welcome to the Skilled Dad Podcast. This is the podcast for dads of all seasons to learn the things that they can do and engage so that they can go and equip the next generation for success. Here we sit down with everyday dads just like you to learn from their story, get inspired, and then start getting after it. So we invite you to join in, see what you can take away from this story, and apply to your life on your journey to becoming the Skilled Dad. Hey guys, and welcome to the Skilled Dad Podcast. My name's Zach Reeser. I'm your host, and we're going to have some fun because this gentleman here, Joe, is the bona fide podcaster himself. And I always love when I can connect with other podcasters because they know the ways around the microphone and how to talk. And it's just been fun talking to him already. We've spent like hours talking, it seems like, Joe. I mean, we haven't even gotten into this thing and we're already like, we're into it. So I'm pumped to have you. But on the episode today, we have Mr. Joe Pomeroy. Joe, thank you for joining me on the Skilled Dad Podcast.
Yeah, I'm so excited. I'm glad to be here. I really feel like we were just priming the pump and now we're ready to get into the best stuff. So
it's like a dress rehearsal, I think. Although I don't, some of the things we talked about, who knows? Maybe we'll come back and we'll be like, I remember how I said that last time and I want to tweak this and tweak that. So let's find,
yeah.
we're going to find out.
Yeah. Well, have you ever had a conversation where you start talking and you kind of hit a few things here or there, and then you come back to it, and now you start getting into the deeper stuff, the stuff you really want to be talking about? I feel like that's what's going to happen. So this is awesome. I'm excited.
I'm excited too. So Joe is, like I said, he is a podcaster himself, and your podcast is Forward with Joe.
Mm-hmm.
And we have a shared interest. This is Skilled Dad Podcast, and not everyone that comes on the podcast is doing like a platform or a thing around being a dad or around a family. But we're all dads, with the exception of two guests that have been on this podcast. My wife was one of them, and then Dr. Andrea Mata, who's awesome, go listen to her, was on this as well. But we're all dads, which is what brings us here on the Skilled Dad. Is that no matter what you're doing, no matter where you're from, no matter where you come from, we all have the common bond of being dads. And I think that when you cut through, we were talking a little bit about cultural stuff earlier, and that would be interesting to talk about too. Just, every society has culture that develops and changes, and there's new challenges that come with it. But as we were talking through that, regardless of where in the culture you are, this is the culture of dad. And if you listen to this, I'm going to make an assumption that you are in that place where you're driving towards wanting to be a better dad. You're wanting to connect with other like-minded people. And Joe's one of those people, because Forward with Joe is kind of a family first podcast. That's not all you talk about, right? Is that accurate?
Yeah, 100%. It's about parenting. It's about marriage. It's essentially, what does it take to be able to build a stronger family so that you're really laying the foundation for your legacy. And even lately, I've been diving a lot more into how do you prioritize things in life? I mean, even just what we listed, you've got marriage and parenting. So two things there that doesn't even incorporate what it is that you're doing as a business. So there's so many elements to life. There's so many things vying for our time. Otherwise, you're not going to be anybody. So if we throw that in there, we've got hobbies, we've got friends, we've got all this stuff. How do we make it work?
Yeah. Well, and with your story, as we break into it, when I learned more about you, we first connected. And then as I've learned more about you, one of the things that was kind of a turning point for you, I had a similar experience. And so I'm sure we'll touch on that a little bit, but we've got a lot of common and we're going to have some fun. And I do have one thing around the topic of kind of the holistic, just in your space and where I've been, kind of you talk about all the different points, the 1,000 points of light that come into it that make us who we are and what we do. But in the spirit of the holistic dad, right? And there's all these areas that we can focus in on where some of your prioritization that you're talking about. So I want to get into that, but I want to
Cool.
hand it over to you. I didn't fill your data, but I'm going to hand it off to you and ask the question or the statement, I guess. Tell us a little bit about yourself, which everybody loves.
Perfect. Well, I'm a tall, dark stranger that likes walks on the beach. Wait, no.
You did
I'm
get the memo about the black shirt, though.
I did get
Thank
the
you.
memo about the black shirt. I mean, what else am I supposed to wear when I'm haven't hit my ideal health targets yet? Yet,
Nailed it.
yet.
Slimming. Good.
So I've been married for nearly 14 years. I've got a 10-year-old, an 8-year-old, and an almost 6-year-old. And they are amazing. You know, I've been in business and entrepreneur stuff. I've had the opportunity to work with some amazing people and do some amazing things. And really, that's kind of where my story begins because we think about. I love this concept of the skilled dad because it's how do you get skills? How do you develop skills?
Mhm.
And those skills, this idea that we're just born that way, I don't agree with. I think we're all born with particular tendencies that might point us in one direction or another, that might have us be more inclined to do something versus another. But it's what we spend our time on that magnifies whether something becomes a true skill and we become a master of that skill or something falls by the wayside
Yeah.
and we have no clue. Right.
Mm.
So I mean, I've always been an entrepreneur at heart. I've always loved doing things with pursuing business. That this idea that you could build something from nothing was so exciting. So, that's what I went to school for. I've got a bachelor's in marketing. I've got a master's in strategic business. I dove right into business even while I was still in school, and I helped build an 8-figure company from
Nice.
nothing to the 8-figure company.
Nice.
I mean, we were doing more in revenue a month than most other companies in the state of Arizona were doing the entire year.
Mm.
And in all of that, all of this time focused on developing my skills as an entrepreneur, developing my skills as a leader, as a builder of business, which
Yep.
meant no focus on family, no focus on marriage. That's what was falling to the wayside. So that's where my skill set was.
I, I want to touch on something you said. What was the space that you were in? Entrepreneurial
So
space.
working with we had contracts with the state of Arizona to
Mm.
support families that had kids with developmental disabilities.
Okay. Very cool. And to make that an 8-figure business too.
Mhm.
That's impressive. Oh, I remember how you said it now. Essentially the idea that we're inherently made with all these skills. So the skilled dad, I'm not going to necessarily break down my definition of it, but to your point, it's an aspirational thing because your oldest is 10, right?
Mhm.
My oldest is 9. I am developing skill sets for the season that I'm in, the chapter of the book that I'm in. I'm going to have to learn new skills as they get older because new challenges come. And in the business space, like you're talking about, an entrepreneurial space, was it a startup? I mean,
Not a startup in a traditional sense,
okay.
but it was I mean, we got funding when said, "Hey, we want to open brick and mortar business here. Let's get going."
Hmm.
So in that sense, yeah.
Yeah. Well, it's still with something like that, you have to have a startup mentality,
Oh yeah,
you
100%.
know? So if no one's been in that environment, a startup mentality is what you were explaining. Like you're focused and you're driven and you're going after it. And it's a lot of work to get the results that you might want to get. But when you have a startup, you're not the first startup in the world, but we can go and reinvent the wheel, right? We're going to do things the way we do, but we're going to learn from other people. So if I look down and that's what's happening. Um,
Judgment free zone. Judgment free.
are skilled dads born or are skilled dads made? And which one are you going to be? That's why we have this podcast so that the people listening, you want to be skilled. And the way you get those skills is through knowledge. And then knowledge is great, but knowledge without application is just being really good at trivia. Skills are made when the two are brought together and then you get the actions with the knowledge you've done and then repetition and you get better at it and learning from people like Joe. who's been there before you. So anyway, you got me all jazzed up on that one. But no, I think that, a lot of people fall into that focus zone. And one of my questions for you, and I'd love to hear, any more on that you'd be willing to expand upon, is why were you doing it? Like you were building the business and
Mm.
you were driving and potentially, at the neglect of your family. Like why what was driving you?
What was actually driving me, or what was I telling myself I was driving me, or how about both?
Let's start with the one you were telling yourself it was driving you and what was
Oh,
actually driving it.
it was for my family. Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. I wanted to become successful and build this lifestyle for my family.
What were you really doing it for?
Oh, man, I was really doing it
No one's gonna
for,
come on this podcast with me.
the truth is, I mean, essentially what it all comes, the simplest answer is a single word answer, and it's me. Like, that's what I was really doing it for. Now, why was I doing it for me? I mean, we can talk about everybody that said I couldn't, everybody that said I wasn't good enough, everybody that's made a comparison or that said, this is what you're supposed to have. This is what success means. This is what being a provider for your family means. All these other definitions, other people's definitions that I was trying to build a lifestyle around.
Yep.
I mean, there's all those external things, those past experiences. And essentially what it all came back to was I was doing it to prove me to me. Like it was about me.
Yeah. Trying to prove something.
Yeah.
Yeah. No, I bring that up. It's because like I get it. Like I empathize with it. I understand it, and it comes up quite a bit. One of the episodes that I had, actually, I was on somebody else's podcast when I said that, but it's while we're doing it for our family, we also have to be very careful about what we're doing to our family.
Mm.
And so my story, I have some things that resonate in that. The definition of success is probably one that needs to be evaluated as we mature, as we grow, as we change and things happen in life. But what's your perspective on, and this conversation happened last week, and I really kind of bit my tongue because I didn't want to dive into it too much in this environment. But there was a very much a working 80 hours a week and you are doing it for your family. And like people just don't understand that you have to do X, Y, and Z to provide everything. And I get that. Like we can't just sit around, and the perspective was on tossing that to essentially their narrative went to when you give up that lifestyle, then that means that you're giving up all of your ability to have financial success
Mm.
as well. And I think that's an interesting paradigm. What are your thoughts on that? Anybody that's listening to that might be saying, Zach and Joe, you guys can adios it because I work all the things I just said. What do you think about that?
Man, it starts with a question. And it goes back to the question that you already asked. It's, who are you doing this for? Like, why are you doing it? If you are engaging in those activities and behaviors for a lie, whether it's a lie you're telling yourself, whether it's a lie that somebody else has told you, then you're doing it for the wrong reasons. I don't care if somebody goes and works 80 hours a week, if that's in alignment with their vision and their values and how they define success and how they define how they're to be a provider. Now, in my opinion, is that going to be the healthiest thing if they've got a spouse and children for them to be working 80 hours a week? In my opinion, no. But that's based on my values and how I determine to approach life. And
Mhm.
so really it comes down to, for me, a couple definitions. How do you define success? And how do you define being a provider? And when I figured out the provider thing, that was actually the first one for me. That was actually the
Yeah.
first one for me, was because I recognized my definition of a provider strictly revolved around finances.
Hmm.
I mean, we're talking like leave it to beaver type mentality where it's, 1950s sitcom where, dad goes to work in the morning, and reads the newspaper while he's eating breakfast that his wife makes for him. And, I'm going to go work. I'm going to work my 9 hours, depending on what projects due. And I'm going to come home and, sit back and relax while the wife puts the kids to bed. Like this whole this whole mentality, because my role was to be a provider.
Mhm.
And that meant I was to provide a roof. I was to provide safety from physical dangers, and I was to put bacon on the table. And that's it.
Yeah.
And that, not at all conducive, not at all healthy for the kind of relationship that I wanted. And if you
Mhm.
think about it, you go back to those 1950s sitcoms or something like that, or even if I'm using my parents as my example, we model what we see. And we're
Yeah.
talking about, where do we develop these skills? We develop them based on where your focus is. What are you putting your focus on? Are you putting it on to, if you're going to learn to be a blacksmith, do you, go to the baker, or do you go to the expert blacksmith? Like, where are you watching to develop these skills?
Well, if it's any consolation, I just wrote down blacksmith or baker. So that one worked.
Sweet.
Yeah, nailed it.
I usually give the warning after one that hopefully worked, as opposed to one that obviously didn't work. So,
Well, so the breadwinner, right? The idea, even what it says and what it means, the breadwinner, you're bringing the food. And I think, I do think you nailed it. So, for full disclosure, before jumping on here, Joe was like, if you disagree with me on something, I want to make sure you tell me. And so I will, but I haven't yet. But when we talk about the idea of the breadwinner, I think a lot of us, and I'm speaking for myself and I'm speaking for guys I've talked to, okay, that it is all around the financial. But I think if you even take that beyond to what does financial success look like to you? Is it go get as much as you absolutely can? Is that it? Like, what does that financial get you? I think taking a level beyond that, when talking through this with guys, and what I've found too is the idea of like what I'm doing is the thing that I must do to do this, and that's the only route. I'm telling it all comes down to what Joe said is what is your vision? And I think that's where that's missing in a lot of ways to really know what you're going after and then defining that and having that hard conversation with yourself and your spouse to be able to do that. But when we're going down the path of kind of back to what you said earlier, are you inherent with these skills? You're going to learn new skills over and over in your life. If you don't, you're not growing anymore. And that's a bad thing. It's a new skill set to be able to step out into the uncomfortable and challenge your paradigm. And so having vision and developing vision is key and being able to do that. And if you have any questions on how to do that, there's several episodes we talk about different methodologies about that. But at the end of the day, ask yourself, what do I want? What does my wife want? It's a good place to start. Because if she wants something totally different than you, we need to have a vision that we align on. Otherwise, you're going to have troubled waters ahead. The financial side of it is part of success. But I've also had the conversation with guys that are further down the road than I am that said, I had all these things, and all I really wish I had was more time with my kids.
mm,
And so you burn it and you're providing all these things and stuff. And majority of the time, all they really want is more of your time, unless they're kind of taught that things and stuff are what bring them happiness. Ask yourself, why are you doing what you're doing? What are you doing it for? And who are you doing it for? And what does winning look like? Because you
yeah.
might find that you don't have to go as far down to get what you're actually wanting. So anyway, wow, what a rant. Joe, you got me fired up today, man.
Well, so I think it's interesting with what you just said, because I talked about defining two things: define provider, define success. So you dived into, okay, if we're only looking at the financial aspect, the second part of that is you have to define success. Because if I want to be a provider, if I decide for myself that, okay, being a provider for me, I won't say if, I'll say, what have I defined? By the way, if you don't like your current definition of something, but you're not sure what it should be, that's why you come listen to podcasts like this one, Zach. That's why you go surround yourself
Mhm.
with people that are engaging in behaviors that you think you might want to pursue. You don't have to know, but
Yep.
if you have a desire to know, then you can borrow somebody else's definition, see how it fits, see if it's improving your life, if it's making things better. See if there's one thing that you hear today that you can say, you know what, I'm going to do that for the next 7 days. And I'm going to see if it makes a difference. You can borrow something and then develop it into your own. So my
Yeah.
definition for provider is, it's how I show up mentally, emotionally, spiritually, physically, and financially. So there's those 5 elements to it.
All right.
As of this moment in time, I don't make as much money as I did when I had that 8-figure business.
Mm-hmm.
And I am so much happier. And I am a way better provider than I was then.
Mm-hmm.
And I'm okay with that because the second half, defining success. Well, what is success? Success for me at one point was how big's my bank account? Success at one point for me was how long, if I lost my job today, how long could I continue putting food on the table for my family?
Mm-hmm.
Now, I don't think that's a bad measurement. I'm not saying that's a bad measurement. I think in a lot of ways, we need to be looking at things like that. But
Yeah.
that was my only measurement for success.
Yeah. You got to have the measurement, but I'm with you. So I'm just emphasizing the point that I think that's what the gentleman was talking about in
Mhm.
that zone where it's like, I'm going to go all in on the other side. It's like total pendulum swing where I take a massive pay cut and now you're struggling with your bills even more. Everyone's financial situation is different. Get a budget and learn a budget. That's a skill that everyone should. But that's the pendulum swing, right? There's this idea. It's like it has to be all in one versus all in on the other. And that's where I'd love to get your thoughts on that because I think that's the part that I've run into guys that struggle with breaking from the paradigm of like, if I don't work this much time or make this much money, then we're gonna go totally broke. But I also want to do this. So I'm gonna go do this. And then I actually make less money than we do need to run our household
Yeah.
or save for the future. And so now there's that paradox of providing holistically, but it doesn't
Yeah.
have to be that full swing. Your
Well,
thoughts?
and I just from so I love psychology, which is part of why I love marketing and I love business and stuff. The psychology of there's some amazing books out there. Why We Buy by I can't think of the author, but I want to say it's Cialdini, but it's not Cialdini. Cialdini is influence.
That's a good book, by the way.
So understanding the psychology behind change, it is natural to do a pendulum swing. It is natural when somebody is raised in a Christian home or in a very strictly religious home that maybe they have some really negative experiences and decide they don't want to be in that anymore. It's a natural response for them to swing as far away from that as they can and maybe become atheist or agnostic or whatever. It's natural for somebody, it's not, look at society. It's natural when you have one political group begin to make laws that seem so extreme and so far to one side that the reaction then is to no, we need to yank that all the way back to the other side.
Mm-hmm.
So it's natural, this idea that, man, I'm pouring too much in, but I need to be a better dad. So I'm just going to abandon all the work stuff. I'm going to abandon that 80 hours. I'm going to go take this other avenue and I'm going to make that work. That's not a plan, right? That's not a plan. That's not a vision. That's a reaction. And if there's a skill that as dads we can develop that would be so essential is the skill to act rather than react.
Mm-hmm.
How many times have your worst moments as a dad, Zach, come when you reacted to your child's behavior, when you reacted to something they said or they did, either to you or maybe to one of their siblings, rather than being in control of our own agency and saying, this is how I'm choosing to act, regardless of what others do around me?
Yeah. We use the term in our household reaction rather than reaction. It's response.
Mm.
So reaction is immediate, emotional usually, and doesn't always produce the results we want. Response is more stepped away, collected, and now I'm going to respond. You gave me a secret, I'll give you one. This is the Skilled Dad podcast, not the Skilled Husband podcast. And I've gotten much better at my response to the kids, but have reaction with my wife. And that's the area of growth that I continue to work on. That's just
What do you mean not always? I hope always. Why would you ever stop trying to work on that behavior and develop it better with your wife?
the only reason I would stop is because I'm doing it less. But
So you're perfect.
yes,
Okay.
because
Yeah.
then we'll switch this podcast to the Perfect Dad Podcast.
By the
So
way, if we're all waiting to be perfect for us to then make that next transition,
we're waiting for a while.
long time, long time.
Exactly. But no, that's a great thing to throw out there as far as a skill set. Our center of gravity is around being dad and our experiences, right? That's our collection points, our unity point. But all the skills, this is the DNA that I've seen. You've been in leadership roles. I've had the opportunity to be in leadership roles. And a lot of the things that we learn in work and all the trainings and how to work with people and lead people and influence and inspire, sometimes I don't know if this applies to you, but sometimes when we get home, it's like we forgot all the trainings that we got for working with the people at work. And they do cross pollinate, they do work in both places. So reaction and response at home, very important. And I hear a lot of guys say, like, I wish I hadn't yelled at my kids or whatever because of that reaction.
Mhm.
You can apply that in the business world too. So this is like a business dad podcast sometimes. But no, that's a great call out. And thank you for calling me on my perfect being a husband.
Hey, I want to make sure I answer the question you had previously because I don't
Yep.
want to leave anybody hanging. So the question is this transition. Okay, I'm spending 80 hours a week. I'm spending all my time trying to provide, and I know I need to do something different, but I don't know the way out of that. Okay, so my response is that you start one step at a time. And that
Yep.
first step is creating a vision of what it is you do want and getting crystal clear on that. And the key, in my opinion, on creating an effective vision is that you don't do it alone. You mentioned, what does your wife want? Well, why not sit down with your spouse and your kids and being like, hey guys, I recognize, holy cow, do you all understand the power of a dad that apologizes?
Oh yeah,
Right?
that's massive. Yep.
Yeah. So you come in and you say, hey, I've realized me working as much as I am, it's not allowing me to be the dad, the husband I want to be. And I don't know exactly how to change that because I
Mhm.
feel like I need to be working this much. What would we all like to do if we had kind of the ideal situation with how much I was home, things that we got to do, where it is that we lived? What would your kids like? And it's
Mm.
such a cool conversation to get your family involved in as you're painting those pictures, because when you respond to them and you go, oh man, that would be awesome if we had a boat and could go to the lake or go fishing, or if we took a trip every year to the beach, like, wouldn't that be so great? And your kids see you getting excited about the things that they're shaying, I don't know what shaying is, about the
Oh, you
things that
guys
they're
share things too.
saying.
I gotcha. Yeah.
I'm combining thank you and shay, and I can't, words are hard, man.
They are.
The things that you're saying, it's incredible. It's powerful. And once you have that vision, now you can start to develop your plan. So it's not about jumping ship to try to immediately create balance.
I
There's
mean,
a
do we can talk
we need
we can talk about
intervention.
that
We need intervention.
offline.
My
Yeah.
wife consistently beats me at Mario Kart. She's got an old N64 and we'll
Ah.
bust out the old school Mario Kart and I can never beat her. The reason I stink at
Mm.
Mario Kart so bad is I over any driving game, frankly, is I overreact. If I'm too close to this wall, then it's like the extreme and I go to the other wall and the other wall. You don't find balance by jumping back and forth between the extremes. You slowly move to the middle. If I'm trying to balance something on my finger, like swords. They talk about balancing a sword.
Blades are
Swords.
always good.
Yeah. So you
Mhm.
want a long sword being balanced. I love watching Forged in Fire. You'll hear
Oh,
the judges say so
good
often,
job.
like, this is a little forward heavy. It's hard to control it. I swing it. It's forward heavy. We need some weight on the
Mhm.
back end to get the balance should be right about here on the blade. Okay. You don't, when they're trying to check the balance, you don't see Doug Marcotta go and put his finger on the handle and go, oh, no, it's clearly tipping. Nor does he go put it on the last 6 inches of the long sword and go, oh, nope, it's tipping. They move it to the center and then it slide adjust, slide adjust, slide adjust to try to figure out where that center point is. That's the approach you want to take. If you're working 80 hours a week to try and provide, try 1% less. There's a great book by Mike Michalowicz called Profit First, and he talks about
Mhm.
getting in the habit of paying yourself profit as a business owner. and uses the mentality of, if you can operate your business on $10,000, you can operate it on $9,900. Take 1% profit. So if you're working 80 hours a week, what's 1% of that you're going to decrease? I actually don't know. Is that 8 minutes? 1 hour would be
1 hour of a 40-hour work week?
no. If somebody's working 80 hours a week, what would be 1% for them to take off?
Well,
10% would be 8 hours
see,
of an
this
80
is
hour. I'm going to bust out my
I'm
calculator here.
gosh, we're being shamed so bad times.
80 hours, 60 hours a minute is 4,800 minutes times
48 minutes.
1%, 48 minutes.
We got there, guys.
Oh my goodness.
I might edit that one out because I said 9 hours because I went to a 90-hour work week. I like to go.
If you
100.
edit it out, I would think it would just be people like, okay, look, dad skills, business
Not
skills mean I have a CPA, not math dad. Okay?
Oh, yeah. We
right,
both run
40,
businesses.
start there. If you're working 80 hours a week, we're not even asking for a full hour, but start with 48 minutes. Can you find 48 minutes on the weekend that you completely unplug and better focus on your family? What if you take that 48 minutes, 48 divided by 7 is roughly 7. We're talking 7 minutes a day. What if after you get home, maybe your kids are in bed, maybe they're not in bed. Maybe during your lunch break, you call up your wife and talk to her for 7 minutes every day. That 1% difference, those are the incremental changes that start to have an impact. And here's something man, I really want to promise people this will work, but I feel like there's like FCC regulations that might come back to haunt me. So I can nearly guarantee.
I'll put a
that
disclaimer like on the screen, like.
All right. So can practically guarantee that when you implement a 1% change and say that you call your spouse, or maybe at the time your kids get home from school, you set aside a 10-minute break and you take 7 minutes of it to call your kids and ask them about their day. Even if that 7 minutes is you asking all questions, then going, huh? I don't know. No, it's a start.
Mm-hmm.
And I guarantee you that if you do that for 1 month, for 30 days, you're going to realize two things. One, you're going to wonder why you needed the extra 48 minutes to get your stuff done. And you're going to start to realize I could probably shave off another 48 minutes. So that's the first thing. Number two, your family will notice.
Mm-hmm.
Your family will notice. And when your family starts to see those things, you will notice a difference, both in them and in you. And that's where it gets fun.
Wholeheartedly agree. Been there. And one thing I would throw on, at least from my own experience, when you start making those changes, is that some of them might be shocked. Your wife might be like, why are you calling me? That was me, right? It's like, why are you calling me? And it could feel, it's a change, right? But no, I fully agree with that. And I mentioned the budget earlier, like you're talking about financial piece. Time is the one currency we can't get back. There's no time flow. It's cash flow, but not time flow. I would recommend that you do a time audit, make a time budget, and just do 1 week of like mapping out what you actually did that week. Like actually, how much Netflix you watched, the F1, series that you pulled up, whatever. And you might find that you've got more time than you think, potentially. Like what really is, okay, I just had somebody yell at me in my, I just I heard somebody in the audience and they said, yeah, but I am literally working all the time. I have 4 hours and I sleep and then I get back into it. Okay, let's back up and say your vision that you just went through and you did. What things that you're doing are actually driving towards that vision? Because a lot of activity can also be a different form of laziness. And so activity does not necessarily generate results. So if you don't know what the winning looks like, then how do you know what results you're getting and if they're working towards your thing? So tie that all together. That's really good, man. That's really good. Okay, here's a dad specific question from your experience with 3 kids, and now this is kind of like the the main focus area. Like you're focused on this category, this topic. You're helping people with it.
Mhm.
Um, what has been the most challenging thing for you outside of maybe the work piece that we talked about, but as a dad?
Mm. And, you know, you hear all the time about mom shame. Moms feeling like they're not doing good enough, they're not taking care of their kids well enough or whatever. You don't hear much about dad shame. And I mentioned earlier that the power of a father's apology, right?
Mm, mhm.
And I know that from experience. And I honestly think one of the things that's hardest for me is to come on podcasts like this, to do my own podcast, to be putting out content almost daily on social channels, and feel like I am supposed to be this beacon of idealism, and I'm really not.
Mm.
And but there's this mentality, this idea, like, yeah, I mean, the best woodworkers, they're gonna cut things wrong. I'm looking at your power tools in the background, and I'm thinking like, how many projects has somebody started, or bladesmiths, since we're talking forge and fire, how many times has somebody been doing a Damascus and ruined the welds, and they just got to toss the whole. It will not kill, not cut. It will cut a little. So it's just this thing that I'm trying to go out and implement. And then sometimes the
Mm.
overwhelm still comes. I'm not using my tools that I've learned, that I teach, that I know for a fact work, and I do something stupid. I snap at my kids, I react instead of respond, and then, I realize it. I'll realize it immediately. Sometimes I even realize it when it's happening, and I sit there and I apologize to them before bed. They go to bed, and then it's just me with my thoughts, and I'm thinking, "Man, I'm such a hypocrite." Like,
Yeah.
I've learned to change the shading on that to be, no, a hypocrite gives up. A hypocrite's not even trying to do what they say. I'm trying. So I know I'm not a hypocrite, but I think I only have a few short years. I only have so many moments with my kids, and I just wasted that one. So at the time when I
Mhm.
was making my transition from being all about business to holy cow, I'm bleeding at the top of a staircase. My wife's headed out the door. This is the end of everything. And finding a way to pull that out from a total nosedive, tailspin, utter destruction. There was a lot of workshops that I went to, couples counseling, individual therapy. I had to overcome some addictive behaviors, some different things I was engaging in that were not conducive. PS work can very much be an addictive behavior.
Mhm.
Addiction, I've come to define as I am seeking an external source to meet an internal need. And
Mm.
that can be work, that can be food. Zach, we were joking about how I do comfort eating or whatever. But look, it's really not about that. So the hardest part, kids are in bed and I'm sitting there thinking, how many times can I screw up and they'll still turn out okay?
Mm.
And one of the things I learned through all the counseling stuff that I just mentioned is I said to the therapist, I don't want to have any more kids because I'm going to traumatize my kids. Like, man, I look at some of the stuff that happened with me and I had a pretty dang good life. And yet there's still trauma that I experienced. And my therapist goes, "Oh, Joe, I don't want you to worry at all whether or not you're going to traumatize your kids. Don't even worry about whether or not that's going to happen." And I was like, "No, but I have to." And he goes, "No, no, no, no. Here's why. It will happen.
Uh-huh.
You will cause trauma to your children,
Yeah.
period. The difference is, will you have the ability to recognize it and then strive to correct it or to help give them the tools they need to work through it themselves?"
Mhm.
And that's the hard thing for me to remember when I'm sitting there being upset because it was probably like a week ago or something. My youngest, my almost 6-year-old, something happened. I don't even remember what it was, but I got so frustrated with her. And I was like, we have talked about this, and I'm using the dad tone that I'm not going to use here in the microphone because I'm not proud of it. I would have been so embarrassed for anybody to hear the tone I was using, things like that. She apologized. She felt so sad, and I gave her a hug, and she went to bed. And all I could think of was this amazing, sweet child that God blessed me with, and that I was not being a good steward over.
Mhm.
And it's the, do I have the strength? Do I have the courage? Do I have the support to pull out of that and switch to the side of, okay, so what will I do about it? What will I change? What's one thing that I can implement tomorrow to do a better job? What conversation could I have with her? What does she really need? How can I step into that? That's the hard part, doing that on a daily basis.
Yeah. Well, I appreciate you sharing that. That's why I really enjoy this podcast, because I don't know how many times I've had people reach out, from a little thing here, a little thing there, but it's a big thing to them.
Mhm.
Right. And I think, to your point of, the hypocrisy is giving up. It's the, it's the not striving to recognize and then respond to then make it better. Right. We're all
Yeah.
going to jack something up. And the Skilled Dad podcast, it actually helps motivate me, because I am not the skilled dad. Like, this is not a me thing. I am constantly learning from guys like you, because I want to be in that place. And I also want, and this is why I love, especially when guys like you that are doing family focused platforms, because there's so much that comes out of that. And it's good for our community. It's good for our world, in my opinion, that we're have these conversations so that we can also connect guys that might be like you the other night by yourself, that's thinking
Mhm.
through these things. And then someone else that's listening might hear it. So if you're listening and you hear what Joe's saying, and you've been in a similar boat, it's like, hey, you're not alone, man. I don't want you to think that you're alone, because that's a big lie. And that's what kind of keeps you less dangerous. And I don't mean like dangerous, like a danger, to society kind of way. I mean, i- if you can feel beat down constantly, then you're not going to be as effective for doing good things. And so I appreciate you sharing that. And also, you have my phone number. So if you ever get in that zone where you're like, and you need somebody to whack you upside the head, you just holler at me, bud, because I constantly will have some things like a landmine I step on where I'm like, ooh, I don't think I've ever even done that before, but I won't do it again. So now I've learned. I try to choose to look at the winnings and the failures, like the winning of the failure. It's like, okay,
Mhm.
what can I learn from this? Because had that not happened, I may not have learned this thing. And now that's effective for something else, and it's effective for the future. One other thing I'd throw out, something you said, just a thought maybe for you or for anybody else, is deposits and withdrawals. We're all going to make withdrawals from the relationship account at some point, whether it be your wife, your kids, your family, your work, whatever. Are we making deposits? And deposits can be in our control, and we can intentionally do things that make deposits into that account. So whenever we have more withdrawals than deposits, we're now overdrafted, right? We're pulling from a relationship that it's not there. It doesn't have the equity. So what can we do to make those deposits? And I think something you had said spurred that thought. It's like, at what point will they stop following me or listening to me, or when will I lose credibility?
Mm.
And that's what kind of led me to think of, well, where's your account balance? Are you making more deposits than you are withdrawals? So no, that's a good one, man. And you are definitely not alone in it. And we're constantly being forged in fire, the fire
Yeah.
of parenthood.
I love how all these analogies, these ideas get tied back into business, because as being the providers, that's where we spend so much of our focus, what we go to school for, whether it's a university, a trade school, whatever it happens to be, we spend so much time investing in understanding business, that then to come home and try to develop a level skilled understanding of family and home, there's not enough time, to be honest. There's not enough time. So it's like, okay, well, I understand what it takes when, if there's bad customer service on a project, And I need to reconcile things with that client in order to keep them a raving fan of our company and so that they'll continue to make purchases and refer us out and things.
Yep.
I know what to do for that. Man, I've done that. I've done that hundreds of times. Not in my own business.
Yeah. I have a friend.
I know a guy. Yeah. But, and so it's to go, oh, okay. Well, all those things that I've done and I've applied there, you're saying I can do that with my kid, my daughter that I just sent to bed. And I'm thinking, man, we really screwed up that project. We didn't hit that deadline. We gave them material that's not useful, wasn't what they were looking for. We were way off on the design. You know what I would do? I'd sit down with my team and I'd say, all right, guys, where'd we go wrong? What happened? What do we need to fix? What do we need to correct? That
Postmortem.
same tool applies. Yeah.
Yeah.
So I'm gonna reach out to you, Zach. I'm gonna reach out to my other friends. I'm gonna say, man, I just did a dumb dad thing. Here's kind of what happened. Help me figure out where did I go wrong? How do we correct this? How do we respond? And what I did do in that situation was the next morning, as soon as my daughter woke up, I gave it, kids are so resilient. She comes and she gives me a big hug. She has no idea that I'm sitting there going, oh, sweet girl, I don't deserve this hug. But I'm giving her the hug and I look at her and say, hey, I want to apologize again for what happened last night. I talked to my wife about it and was like, man, I messed up. And I said, you did not deserve to be treated that way or to talk to that way. And it's not your fault that I chose to react that way.
Mm-hmm.
And she just lit up. And it's like, how many times have we done that in business? And the client lets it, well, Zach, you're being a little too hard on yourself. Actually, there's probably some things we could have done to better communicate what we wanted for the design, and then they go on and they're the better client for it. Same idea. We talk about doing financial audits in business and you've brought up doing a time audit. Like consider everything you know about business. And if you think about it, if you give yourself a time to process and think about it, you can find the fundamental principle and translate it to how you show up with your family.
Yep. Hang on a second. I agree.
Then I'm going to chug some water real quick.
I agree with you. Like you are going to get more. And you know what I think that pops out to me on that is honesty. So like you're honest with your customers, right? And you're being honest. So genuine honesty often is going to get you a lot more than trying to like dig your way out of something through, manipulation or anything like that. It's like people know when you're real and they trust real, even if you screwed up, because everyone screws up. So no, that's really good. There's one other thing, but it has escaped me. But what I'd say to those that are listening, like as we're diving through this and driving through and even the business side of it, that's what it was. Business is easy until people get involved. Someone that I used to work with always would say that. And it's just true. Business is easy until people get involved. Family's so easy until people get involved. And so it's a paradox because family is people. Relationships are easy with friends until people are involved because we all have our stuff going on. So tap into them and be bold and don't give up on what it is that you're going towards because as Joe said, like that's where we become hypocrites or that's where we just don't give up. We're dads. And all the way back to the beginning, are you born with something, born a skilled dad? Are you born a leader in work? Are you born whatever? You probably were born with some skill sets that are stronger than someone else has, and they have stronger skill sets than you. If all of us are the same, then, somebody's not needed. But what I would say is it flew out, Joe. Again,
Well, I got something I can fly in.
All right.
If you want to grab it.
Just give me just a second. All right. I'll edit that part out too. I don't do a lot of editing, but today apparently I will. Okay. Go ahead. Fly in.
So there's 3 letters that we're all familiar with. MVP. And when you hear MVP, most people think most valuable player related to sports. MVP also stands for minimum viable product.
I like I told you, this does not happen.
Somebody doesn't want us to get this message out there, man.
That's exactly what I was going to say. Okay.
All right. So I'll jump back in.
MVP.
Right. MVP. So MVP in business stands for minimum viable product.
Mhm.
One of the biggest mistakes that we can make as dads is waiting until we've reached a particular level of whatever before we decide to show up. You know what? I'm going to figure out how to get control of my temper before I start engaging more with my kids. You know what? I'm going to wait until I lose a few pounds before I go and seek out additional intimacy with my wife, about communication and conflict before I start to resolve this lingering issue
Yep.
with my whoever. Like, don't. Minimum viable product. Minimum viable product in business means what's the absolute bare minimum that you need to get that product on shelves. Because what happens is you get it out there, you start doing it, and then you get a response from the market. And the market tells you what they want more of, what they want less of, what they wish was there, what is there that they're so glad is there, and it's just the right amount. So show up for your kids.
Mm-hmm.
You show up for them, and maybe you show up. Your minimum viable product is you show up for their game on Saturday, and you show up and you sit there. And if all you can do is sit there and not be on your phone, huge win. And they say, "Oh, Dad, I'm so glad you're there. I don't mind if you cheer for me." Some of the other dads say, "Oh, okay. Well, now you know something to add to the product.
Right.
You've got another thing you can add." So be the MVP for your family. Both be or MVD. Maybe we need to start
MVD.
that MVD, most valuable dad for your family. Now we got to figure out what to do as far as the business thing, because if it's minimum viable product,
We can just
minimum viable deliverable. There we
you
go.
go.
MVD, most valuable dad, and the minimum viable deliverable. So
Done.
be that for your family.
Yep.
That's all they want.
The MVP ties directly into 1% change. It's the takeaway that I've got is if you listen all the way through, and these things go so fast, but if you listen all the way through and you've heard these different concepts, question is, what are you doing? Why are you doing it? And what can you do a little bit differently to get closer to what you actually want once you figured it out? MVD.
Most valuable dad. I like it.
Joe, we'll have to do this again sometime, man. It was way too much fun and it just flows so fast. I really appreciate you taking the time to be on here and joining me for this and having this discussion, man.
Yeah, absolutely. I do have a free gift for any of the listeners, forwardwithjoe.com/skilleddad. I'm not going to tell you what the free gift is, because to be honest, it'll update based on the feedback I get about what is most valuable as the seasons change. Just know when you go there and check it out, whatever it is, it's going to be big value, and it's going to be something that can impact your family for good immediately.
I will put in the show notes and all the places this goes out to. Thank you for that. And I'm excited to go. I like the intrigue. I'm going to go check it out. I hate a cliffhanger, so I'll probably do it like immediately. But where else can they find you if they want to follow you, learn more about you?
I'm pretty much on any social channel at the Joe Pomeroy. That's not arrogance. It was just to keep it the same on everything. So it's at the Joe Pomeroy, at the Joe Pomeroy. I think the best place to go to is going to be YouTube, because you'll get all the shorts that you would get on any other platform, but you'll also get full length episodes on YouTube, or check me out on X or Twitter. So, but at the Joe Pomeroy, all over the place, folks.
The Joe Pomeroy.
Not to be confused with the average Joe Pomeroy. Yeah.
Oh, that's a good one too, though. No, man, I appreciate it. And guys, go check out what Joe's doing. He's got some great stuff. I've listened to several of his episodes, and it's just, if you're listening to this, you're going to get some takeaways, and hopefully you did on this episode, but then also with what Joe's got. And I'm a big fan of going and connecting with those that you connect with and learning from as many people as you can. If you're in this space, if you're interested in these things, which at this point, I know you are, then there are more resources for you. Because when I first started this, part of the reason that drove this is there weren't as many dad-focused resources available. And now there are more, not as much as the mom space, but definitely more. And you can find some good things. So you go forward with Joe. Go forward with Joe. So, Joe, thank you, sir. You got my phone number. So again, you run into that, you give me a shout.
Thank you for having me on, Zach.
Thank you. Guys and gals, I want to say thank you First of all, thank you for listening to the show. Thank you for those that have. I would throw out and challenge each of you. Go find the vision that you have. Get in alignment with your spouse. What is your vision? Sit down and have that conversation. Make it a date night. Have some fun with it. And then bring your kids into the conversation. What's your family vision? So then that way you can know that the direction you're going and the direction she's going is the same direction. And that way you can have a more fruitful marriage through that. And it will be a lot of fun. So take it from two guys that have been working on that with our spouses. And the last thing there is part of the reason we do this podcast is to connect people, right? We want to connect you with guys and their stories to hear the things that they're experiencing so that you can also find out that maybe you're not the only one if that's ever crept into your brain. Because I guarantee you in many things you're not. Your context of life is different, but a lot of the DNA as dads that we have is very similar. So we don't have to reinvent the wheel, but we can get together and learn from each other. And then also when we have that group, those of you who listen to this podcast enough, you know I'm going to say it. Get that band of brothers around you, whatever you want to call it, your posse, your squad. It's 2 or 3 guys. Start with 1 if you don't have any. 2 or 3 guys that you can call up during those times, like Joe was talking about, and say, "Here's what I got going on." They know your dirty laundry, as Brian Graff said. They know where the bodies are buried, and that's hard to step into. But once you have it, you are going to grow from it. So I look forward to seeing you guys on the next episode. Until then, get that knowledge, get some action. And remember, when you put it into action, that's when you gain skills. Being dad doesn't have to be a DIY. That's why we're here. You're listening to The Skilled Dad.